Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Tim Mikhelashvili. Tim is the Chief Executive Officer and also the co-founder of Amedea Pharma, which is an analytics and management consulting company dedicated to improving healthcare quality, continuity, and innovation. So we're going to be talking a lot about healthcare, pharma, but most importantly, the data and really kind of the management principles that we can be put in place to improve those types of businesses and outcomes. And so, Tim, before we get going, though, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Absolutely. Well, you pronounced my last name very well. It's from the Republic of Georgia, where I was born. Small wine drinking and antique country.
Yeah, I was told recently the home of wine, right? This is yes, exactly.
Yes, the largest biodiversity of grapes there. Yes, and I've lived in the United States now most of my life. I'm in New York with a background in pharmacology. Come from a family of physicians, teachers, business people as well on the other side, and managed to combine these two areas throughout my career. I've worked for 18 years in the pharma and biotech. And coming in, even though I didn't have a PhD or very extensive basic science research experience, I wanted to contribute, to make an impact, to add to the conversation, to improve healthcare quality, regardless of whether or not my ideas were implemented or if they were thought to be self-promotional. Because, ultimately my job was to connect the leading scientists globally, physician researchers, with some of our clinical and marketing development activities. And many of whom became my mentors also, throughout the 18 years. And so started my career at Sanofi, AstraZeneca, and then worked my way in more startup and specialty rare disease companies where I've been able to witness both successes and failures of startups. And I learned that it wasn't just the attributes of the product that predicted success, but ultimately also how we collaborated together, the internal operations as well. And that's what really led me to study organizational change 5 years ago at a transformational time of my life. I'll tell you that, one big inspiration in my life has been sports. Before I even knew any about the pharmaceutical industry or pharmacology for that matter, now as I look back, I always was fascinated by performers using their talent in many various different disciplines. And I ultimately, as I started to work in the pharma industry, I wondered why it was that some of our activities were not always described in a relevant manner or accurately. So I looked at the sports perspective of performance and how performance relates into championships, let's say, and the connection between statistics and performance. And I thought that, look, I needed to improve how the medical professionals' contributions in business and clinical settings is ultimately understood by others. Because medical and the healthcare field, our contributions are not easily interpreted, right? They're not like sales, right? They're very much, they leave a lot to interpretation. And so I wanted to bring more words and numbers rather than pictures in order to leave a lot of those, misconceptions out of the picture when I formed Amedea Pharma.
Yeah. So, let's dig a little deeper on the Amedea Pharma story. Amedea has been around since 2022. And tell me a little bit more about how Amedea has shaped and really where you're very focused on right now.
Sure. Well, Amedea Pharma is based on a very unique formula that combines sportsmanship with data science in order to help medical organizations describe their business and clinical impact, on their healthcare community, on their organization, and patients. And so, most organizations separate performance metrics from culture, yet they are so intimately connected that I've came up with a medical productivity index of framework or model, which crosses the bridge between performance and behaviors, since both of them are so instrumental to the success of the organization, right? Which also allows medical organizations to quantify their activities, even their qualitative activities, but to express them numerically,
Right.
and create certainty in a world of disorder or volatility, if you will, right? In which medical divisions who communicate science in the age of information are often misunderstood, right? So quantifying activities. Secondly, the model weighs performance and behavior equally at 50% each, and also distributes accountability evenly, internally and externally, right, at 50% each. So it's a very daring type of approach, but most balanced type of approach that is more likely to inspire, not only measure, but inspire stronger performance and engagement,
Right.
which I've tested and launched in various different startups before successfully. And so a lot of the people who may kind of be somewhat skeptical will say that, look, there's a lot of pressure anyway, on sales. We don't want that same kind of pressure in medical. We just want to do no harm, right? But unfortunately, most organizations, they are built in a way that they have accountability to the patients externally, right? That's why they measure usually their performance on patient outcomes, and don't spend as much time on, don't have enough time to measure internal operations, right? However, paradoxically, it's really the internal operations that ultimately also contribute to those externally facing outcomes. And that's what's been missing in the picture of performance reviews.
It's really interesting what you're highlighting, and it's something that I would say that it's not just in the pharma healthcare space. I mean, I would say everyone's trying to align, trying to think about, okay, I need to develop a performance-based culture for sure if I want to have a successful business. However, I also need to figure out what that means for the culture and how I manage that. So I think that what you're saying is really, really interesting. Is there a good example that you can share, maybe even an anonymized way, that would help our listeners get a sense of exactly what you guys are working on?
Sure. We're currently working on a particular playbook that utilizes data analytic principles, basic data analytics principles that ultimately will allow business leaders of various different life science organizations, medical organizations, health systems, to evaluate their own particular individual metrics, and how do they align with their ultimate organizational goals. And so this is a playbook that we've developed that's very extensive, that bases a lot of its framework on organizational change research from successful organizations within pharma and outside of pharma. And ultimately it allows you to score your own metrics using a 10-question survey and a scoring algorithm, and then also to be able to create a training program around particular metrics that you would be able to dial every quarter and also get feedback through surveys, both internal and external surveys from customers and your colleagues who are directly impacted by the work that you're evaluating, that you would be able to customize for various different functions.
And Tim, I mean, I'm just kind of curious here, because one of the things that I find, and I haven't done any data work in the healthcare space, but in my media and marketing world, I've done extensive work. And I always find, obviously, that, you can collect a ton of data, a ton of information, but at the end of the day, it kind of helps you need to boil it down, and you find out that there are like just a handful of things that kind of are the keys. Is that something that your customers find over time, where they just kind of like, oh, wow, if we just change this one thing, that can have a macro impact?
Yeah, the problem is that I think most business leaders, or those who are in the trenches, in the front lines, they don't have the time, and nor are they incentivized to look back very systematically at all the different types of activities that they do, and how do they relate to particular outcomes. And so a lot of time is spent on actually just subjective evaluations, and decisions as a result are then kind of like shooting in the dark, rather than they're unpredictable. They may have unpredictable outcomes, because most of the time organizations tend to report positive outcomes,
Right.
and they don't have a feedback loop nor incentives to understand, okay, what did we do wrong? What activity was really maybe not necessary for this particular role? And how can we, maybe repurpose mistakes, for example, in R&D in a different way, or look at that mistake, but maybe, just fine tune it somehow.
Right.
In order to make sure that you're improving quality of care, which none of my colleagues have a doubt about, based on my understanding. But unfortunately, very few healthcare professionals working in the industry will be very excited or understand or could explain to you, for example, how they're measured in terms of the metrics. And that's what I'm trying to create a science of performance metrics, rather than very subjective.
Do you find right now, Tim, that now that we're moving into, I guess I would say, an era where capturing data, formatting data, and then kind of pulling insights and analyzing it are becoming a little bit more accepted? And now everyone's obviously talking about applying that to machine learning models going forward. Are you finding that customers are more open to these types of discussions?
Yes, they are. Absolutely. However, they're also, inundated with various different types of solutions that do not have a high degree of explainability of machine learning, algorithms, or the methodology that is being used. And so there's a huge need in increasing the training in basic, even in basic data science type of training, or among domain experts. So essentially, you need to kind of combine the people who understand the numbers with the people who understand the business, in order to be able to work together and generate the context, not just the attention of metrics that may or may not be meaningful if you're using AI or various different types of ML, right? So you need to, and that's why it goes back to, the three basic types of analytics that we have, of course, are descriptive, which show us the patterns, which tell us about, particular trends. You have predictive analytics, which tell us about a correlation of one activity and an outcome. A correlation, meaning that one occurs in precedence before the outcome, and is usually tied together. But very few analytics companies tell us prescriptive analytics, meaning the causation. And what data science will explain to you is that prescriptive analytics tell you how that activity actually caused that outcome. And that's where that's the gap that I'm trying to fill with Amedea Pharma, where yes, you can have lots of prescriptions claims databases, and you can extract lots of data using technology nowadays, right? But if you want to understand whether or not a medical professional really improved or played an instrumental role in that physician's decisions, clinical decisions, I believe that you need to hear that from the physician themselves.
Right.
And so you need to find a way to, and only once you follow this process over time will you be able to then not just guess at those kinds of outcomes that you want to replicate or those masterpieces, but you'll be able to reproduce them. But it takes time. It's not a one-time solution or a panacea that many people think ML and AI really is, or even basic data science principles that I'm talking about.
Right.
Sometimes maybe just as relevant.
Tim, I mean, it's great to go through all of this, but in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, all right, so here's a gentleman. He comes from a family that was related to the pharma world. Is that what kind of drove the passion for this space? And tell me a little bit about, why is it that you do what you do?
Well, I love to inspire people. I chose to do something that based on what inspired me, the people that inspired me, and the kind of lifestyle that inspired me, or the ideas that inspired me for most of my career, I can now fortunately say. So it wasn't the outcomes that I followed, but it was the inspiration actually, and the actual activity, the joy and the meaning of the lifestyle that I wanted to create for myself. And so for me, I want to be able to kind of combine both the creativity, the creative part of my brain, and to exercise it more, along with the analytical part of the brain, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're in healthcare, you need to be able to compare, what allergy medicine to take, and which one to choose from the shelf when you go to the pharmacy, right? We compare based on our 5 senses, based on the information we have up to that point, that given point. And so and that's why the medical affairs function in which I've worked, I think, is an important one, is very relevant today in the age of information, because we ultimately provide the context. We provide the education and the context around medical information, and we disseminate it, or we generate it as well. And we help, research and development. We transform companies and different products.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really, being able to help improve quality of care, because quality of care is more than patient outcomes. You can have a great product with great patient outcomes, but if the stakeholders within the healthcare system with which that patient interacts, based on their social determinants, based on their background, do not provide them with the conditions that are necessary, then they will not get the benefit of the most innovative drugs.
Right.
And so that ultimately, those are some of the questions that I'm trying to solve. And because by being a little bit more introspective as an organization, as a business, caring most importantly about the external outcomes and performance, but being a little more introspective, we can ultimately decrease the interdepartmental rivalries that happen. We can be more accountable, because you can't really hide from data anymore. Data is more exposed than ever before. So why not then make the performance review process not dreaded, but use that same PR abbreviation as personal records? And so what my company is trying to do is apply a sportsmanship and scientific method to change how we work, into going to work as if you were competing in a sport.
I like it. And I see it being, you're really part of a kind of a holistic movement, I would say, that's rethinking this space for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tim, as you look forward, I'm not a big believer in looking at the long-term future, but the short-term future, what's on the horizon for the industry as well as Amedea Pharma?
Sure. Well, the healthcare industry is, I think, is now at a very transformational point. Where the pendulum is really swinging in such a way that it's no longer resilient to crises that happened, let's say, in other industries, right? To which it was previously very, more immune to, if you will. Nowadays, we have more urgency than ever before in order to change, to transform what is often thought of as a cost or utilization of healthcare, which has tripled in the last 20 years in the United States, for example, while life expectancy has decreased to its lowest over the same period of time. We want to change that into an investment, right? Investing a little bit earlier, because particularly in the United States, where now we have many, many more rare diseases and many more pharmaceutical companies that are partnering with the government, with the patient advocacy groups, in order to make screening for various genetic diseases more realistic and more accessible within the reach of people. That way, you can study various different mutations. You can decrease the time to diagnosis, which is very critical. And you can connect patients to clinical trials more. Instead of patients coming to pharmaceutical companies to participate in clinical trials, we as manufacturers will go to them based on the data and the technology that we have at our disposal. And what I'm seeing, what I'm encouraged by, Bent, is that more large companies, large pharma companies, are coming together and they're sharing more information on, let's say, drug target databases that were previously very, they're private, and they represented intellectual property, right? But we're sharing it more in large collaborative networks, and one of which I'll mention is called Melody, with 2 L's and 2 D's. It's a huge initiative. Top big pharma companies are now doing that in an effort to accelerate drug development, so that in the future a patient doesn't have to wait years until a treatment or a trial is now available in their town or in their country, or when they move from one physician to another, one healthcare system to another, they can still hold on to their records and expect to have high quality of care no matter what provider they see. That's the kind of hope that I have.
Well, I think we all have it, Tim. I mean, anybody who has gone through any medical procedure in their lives, the number of forms that you have to fill out and the data, and you always hope that there's easier ways that this all can be collated, especially probably as digital professionals. Digital professionals are going like, this doesn't seem this doesn't seem right, But I think we made some progress, which is great, and there's certainly a lot of opportunity going forward. Tim, if someone wanted to learn more about what you and the Amedea Pharma team are up to, where's the best place to reach you?
Well, I keep our website very much up to date. So amedeapharma.com, AMEDEA Pharma, all one word, .com. I'm very excited because right now we're hosting our second annual Medical Affairs Innovation Olympics, in which we're going to have Olympic gold medal champion swimmer, 5-time gold medal winner, Gary Hall Jr., as well as other executives, CEOs of pharma companies, and all-star executives and expert judges, panelists, globally renowned healthcare quality experts, and a lot of different startups who are going to compete over 16 days.
Wow.
And we launched this Olympics last year, first ever Innovation Olympics with this unique format that has a timeless Olympic spirit to it, and very transparent feedback and evaluation system. And I'm really excited about that. You can learn more about the event and participate. It kicks off September 18th until October 4th.
Perfect.
And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Tim Mikhelashvili, or Amedea Pharma. Follow our page, Amedea Pharma on LinkedIn, where I'm very active as well.
That's great. The Olympic thing really leading into an Olympic year, which is perfect. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on UNCAGED today. We've been speaking with Tim Mikhelashvili. He's been telling us about Amedea Pharma, where he is the chief executive officer and co-founder. Take a look at Amedea Pharma's website, and maybe you can join this Innovation Olympics. It sounds like a lot of fun. Thanks again, Tim, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Cheers.